Hello and welcome back to Lorcana Villain. My name is Baker, and today we're taking a look at 10 safe Day 1 meta decks for Set 4 format. We now know all the cards that will be coming in Set 4, Ursula's return, and all the new cards are available for online play. I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of days looking at a lot of deck lists that are going around the community, engaging in discussion with a playtesting group that I'm a part of. Now, all these decks are just meant to act as a starting point. In online testing, as is always the way at the beginning of a new format, everyone's just throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. There's a lot of big dreamer decks out there, a lot of musketeers, brooms, pirates, so it's going to be hard to get a real grasp on the meta until things settle down a bit and we start seeing top cut lists from tournament play. And that's not to say that I'm not excited to try out some brooms and pirates and myself, I absolutely am, but today's video is going to focus more on what I expect to be the top tier decks, or at least the starting point as something that you could take to your constructed tournament on Set 4 release weekend, and feel safe that it should perform relatively well. Rest assured, my next video we're going to look at 10 fun / rogue decks that I think could be semi-competitive. A lot of the decks that I'm going to show you today look relatively the same as they did in the prior format. After we've done more testing and we've got more tournament data, it could be that more of the Set 4 cards end up being better than we first thought, or it could go the other way and the stuff that's being tried ends up not being as good as we thought and decks end up looking even more like they did last format. But there are a few standout cards that I'm more confident will have a pretty cemented place in the meta, and these few cards alone will cause adaptations to our lines of play. A few in combinations could realistically have 2 or 3 different versions of the build that could do well, such as Steel Amber Songs. You could go a Lantern build, a Flute build, or a Pride Lands build. But for this video, I'm just going to show one example of each ink combination that I present. But that's all the yapping for now, so let's jump right in. And if you're planning on buying any singles from Ursula's return, then check out Cardmarket for all your trading card game needs. Alright, we'll start off with the deck that I know the best, good old-fashioned Ruby Amethyst Control. Not a lot of changes from prior formats. We're trying out the new Super Goof, 4-cost inkable 2/4 with Rush and Super Peanut powers. When he challenges a character, we gain an extra 2 lore. Really, I think he has felt a little underwhelming, but I don't know. I'm not settled on how I feel about Super Goof, because just the extra reach has felt good, especially because I'm also still playing Pinocchio. Some players have dropped it for the Brawl, which we are also playing. We'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, helps you set up a nice Super Goof turn if they're just not questing. But again, if they're not questing, then they're not winning the game. So creating a stalemate isn't the end of the world. But yeah, he's not the best card in the world. But again, it's similar to if we're close at the end of the game, sometimes you just need a goat or goat bounce. And with Super Goof, sometimes if they've got a character already exerted, just Super Goof for game, or we can combine it with Pinocchio to just get that last bit of reach that we really need. As I mentioned, we are playing the new Brawl. There's a lot of really good viable targets for this. Ursa, Deceiver of All, Flavisham, Stylish Surfer Mini, or I don't think you're going to see her much anymore. The Small Pegasus, which doesn't feel like a great trade, but again, it's an evasive character. It's the reason I'm playing Pascal's in this list, as you can see. 61 cards in this list, by the way. But yeah, I'm running Pascal's, but again, it is a target, the Small Pegasus, or the Robin Hood. Again, still not a great trade. We'd rather play Pinocchio to exert that and challenge. But again, sometimes if you're doing it on the play on turn 3, before they get to their turn 3 and they can shift, then it can feel okay. There's the new Sisu, the 3-cost uninkable with evasive. Get rid of that. That's also an option that you could put into this deck, but we'll get to that. Doc, or the new Gaston from Mufasa. I think Gaston's going to be really good. Arthur, Super Goof, Perdita, the Piglet, the Quest for 3 if you've got 3 characters. Flynn Rider, Opposing Rabbit, stop them bouncing them and just keep getting value. Diablo, who I've seen so much discourse about. Players, is it good? Is it bad? We're all agreed that you need to answer it straight away, or it can be really, really good. So good to have an answer to that. Mulan, again, she's only actually got 2 strength. It's only on the turn she's shifted where she gains strength. So if you need to get rid of that. Lumiere, which I think some decks, mostly Mufasa, is going to use to help keep things out of range. Ursula, Vanessa, the one with Singer 4 from Amber. So there's a bunch of targets for Brawl. So I do think it's a really good addition. But I still like having the Pinocchio. I like having it on a body. We can bounce it and reuse it. It also means that we can deal with things from turn. If we're on the play and we open Rafiki, then whatever they put down, we can immediately Pinocchio and get rid of. We don't have to always invest our turn 3 into getting rid of those smaller things. So I'm still enjoying the Pinocchio. And that is literally it. That's all I've included from the new set. I have dropped down to 2B prep, which, if you've been watching my channel for a while, may surprise you because I was reluctant to even go to 3. But I do think it's probably the right call at this point in time. We have a lot of removal as it is. We're super mid-range now anyway. I still like having the Be Prepared. Some players have cut it completely, which I don't agree with. I feel it's still nice to have your big red panic button, but it just safeguards you a bit more against 2-drop Ursula. Considerations that you could go about adding in this deck. As I mentioned, the Sisu earlier, the 3-cost uninkable. There's a lot of targets that will only have 1 strength, such as typical 1-drop 1/3s, like I'm running the Olaf, the Pascal, the Pegasus, Pinocchios, Rapunzel. There's a few other targets for her. So I know a lot of people are trying the Sisu and really enjoying her. There's also the Peter Pan Shadow to help with evasive characters, especially Diablo, to be able to deal with that. And you could also consider the new Ursula, the 2-drop with Challenger 2, the Eric clone from Chapter 1. And you could potentially even try out the Floodborn. She's got a pretty good stat line. 4/7 obviously means she's out of Medusa range. She survives Zeus. Questing for 3. Being able to exert characters just for questing her is a strong ability. And the second ability where they can't exert to sing songs. Against Steel Amber songs, that's going to be good. It's not one of my bigger considerations, but if you wanted to try her out, I wouldn't blame you. I think the only other really fair consideration for Ruby Amethyst going forward is Be King Undisputed, which I really like. Again, I'm trying to lower my song count in general. So going down to Be Prepared to then go up to Be King Undisputed, I feel is counterproductive to that if I'm trying to give myself a better game plan against Emerald Ursula. I've seen a couple of decks that have cut the Be Prepared completely and just gone to Be King Undisputed. And I think there's something to be said for that. That could end up being the better way to go. I'm still on the to Be Prepared, but you could interchange those to whatever you see fit. But yeah, I still think it's going to be a really good deck. It's probably going to be in the same situation as last format. It's not going to have any particularly great matchups, nor should it have any particularly terrible matchups. It should just be a consistent deck that I still expect to do well. Going on to Ruby Sapphire Control, which was doing really well last format and was really kind of pushing Sapphire Steel and Steel Amber songs out to a degree because those decks just don't play well into Ruby Sapphire. But yeah, a fair few new toys. This particular build, I'm including the Mulan package. Now, this may not be the best way to play Ruby Sapphire Control, but I do think it's very strong if you can, like, again, just the threat of having this Mulan on board going into your turn 4 or 5, because it could be your turn 4 with ramp. It's just they're not gonna turn sideways into a board where your Mulan could just come down and just wipe theirs. So I think it's a nice check, and if you can get it off, then it's just gonna be game changing. It's also nice against this deck always struggled against like faster aggro decks, but we do now have a path to be able to clear their board for turn 7 Be Prepared. Well, it's probably a turn 5 or 6 Be Prepared with these colours, because obviously we can ramp. But with this Mulan, we could quite easily turn 4 or 5, get this Mulan off to immediately clear their board, and hopefully they're not already too close to game by that point that we can then just overwhelm them. So I do think this Mulan package is definitely worth trying. I'm including the new Sisu in here. Again, it's a strong card. I think you could include it in Ruby Amethyst, but I think in this deck it's got a real nice place, especially where our early game isn't great. We've still got the dimes. I'm still rocking 2 bells. I've got 2 brawls in here again for the early game. Bit more removal. We're running the 4 Vitalosphere as well, which is another 1-drop item, which obviously is always going to be our only 1-drops are items, but we want them down. We want food for Flavisham. We've got Tamatoas in here as well, and Vitalosphere in particular works really well with Floodborn Mulan because it means that you could potentially not shift her and still get a good value value turn out of her. If you've got enough, just put the Floodborn down and then play Vitalisphere, or maybe it's already on the board, and you give Rush and a +2. So you're now challenging in the turn you played her, and she's challenging for 4, which is a bit more reasonable that you're taking something out, and then that's spread on multiple characters. You could still get a board wipe, so I think there's some really nice synergy there. I like the how far I'll go. I know not all red-blue decks play this, but again, this is just the first build to try out. Let me know how you got on with it. Going into Steel Amber Songs, as I said at the beginning, there's a few ways you can build Steel Amber. You can go into Pride Lands, you can go into Flutes. This particular build, I'm leaning into Lanterns, is my favourite way of doing it. Only a couple of new toys. I'm running the new 2-drop Ursula Vanessa, the Singer 4/1/4. Now, you'll notice I'm not running the Floodborn, and the Floodborn Ursula Vanessa is absolutely a strong consideration for this deck, especially if we're running the baby. We can shift onto it, and the ability is basically a built-in bare necessities. But I'm just not crazy about the Eric's Bride Ursula. I'm not crazy about her stat line. I don't feel like she gets one quest off. That's it, really. And yeah, obviously the ability is good, but just play bare necessities is my thought trail. So I'm not running the Floodborn Vanessa, but I think as a 1 count, I think it's quite reasonable. But I still like this Vanessa. She's a way that we can put her down on turn 2, and then turn 3 we can play Aerial, and then we can still have Ursula Vanessa sing either Zeus or Strength of a Raging Fire or Let the Storm Rage On, which I think is really good. She also contributes towards I'm running the Look at This Family Sing Together 7, which may not be in all versions of Steel Amber Songs that we end up seeing actually in top cut lists, but I'm liking it so far. Again, it's nice to be able to pull out your Cinderella Stout-Hearted, your Rapunzel, your Robin Hood, your Benja when you might need them. So I think Look at This Family is definitely worth some play testing, and it helps you get that online. You could of course also consider The World's Greatest Criminal Mind or the Chernobog, but yeah, I think this is a pretty good starting point for Steel Amber Songs in set 4. Going on to Sapphire Steel Wheel, we've got a couple of new toys here. We're running 4 copies of the new Fortisphere, which is very similar to Porp. You draw a card for playing it, which is lovely. We want to set up for Flavisham. We've got Tamatoas in here. But then the second ability, we can pay an ink and banish it, and a character of ours gets Bodyguard. Not really what we're playing it for, but it's something that's absolutely going to come up from time to time. But again, it's just an extra Porp. I am also playing the new Ariel, who I was pretty hard on in my reviews, and I'm still not crazy about her, but I think she's at least worth trying. This could quite easily instead be Gaston, who is just a sure search for a card. So yeah, I think this could reasonably be a Gaston instead. But because we've got 8 1-drop items, the 4 Fortisphere and the 4 Porp, and of course we've got the 4 Quill and the 2 Dime, I think it's reasonable that you could get her online. Again, I think this could be Gaston if you prefer Gaston, but if you want to try the Ariel. But yeah, she might be good in this deck. The only other card that we're playing that's new is Scuttle. 2 cost Ingable 1/3, and when you play him, look at the top 4 cards of your deck to find an item. I think this is just really important because I think this deck is at its strongest when it can go turn 3 Fishbone Quill. I think if it misses that, it can struggle. Of course, it can ramp with 1 jump ahead, but for the best case scenario, you want your turn 3 Fishbone Quill down, I think, more often than not. And this is a way that we can help us find that if we don't find it in our opening hand. Yes, of course, it telegraphs that we're going to play the Fishbone Quill, but if your opponent is running Bare Necessities, if they know you're running Sapphire Steel, they're going to play the Bare Necessities on turn 2, regardless of if they've seen you've got it or not, because that's the game plan against Sapphire Steel, especially if you can snipe the Quill, is to try and snipe the Quill. So I think just the fact that you are telegraphing it doesn't matter. I think it's really important to be able to find it. Of course, we can put down Scuttle on turn 2, and then turn 3, we can sing 1 jump ahead with him, and again, he's a body, so I'm liking the idea of Scuttle. We're playing the Let It Go to deal with the Stout-Hearted Cinderella. Everything else pretty standard, and I think this is a good place to start for Sapphire Steel Wheel. Let me know, Sky. Next up, some Amber Amethyst Hyper Aggro, which as always will always be weak into a steel heavy meta, but can absolutely run away and cheat out a bunch of games. Not a lot of new toys here, in fact only one. I'm playing the new Donald Duck 3 cost Inkable 2/3 with Bodyguard, which is really good in a deck like this, and Wait For Me, when you play this character, chosen character gets +1 lore this turn, which I just think is really good. We're an aggro deck. There's really nice lines where you go 1-drop, 2-drop Piglet, and then 3-drop Donald Duck. duck and you select Piglet, and then he's questing for 4. Again, he's a bodyguarder, so yeah, I like the inclusion. And then yeah, mostly a lot of old toys. We've got the blue here to be another bodyguarder and to gain us lore. Lots of very low to the ground high questing characters. But I am running 3 copies of You Have Forgotten Me, because I think another problem that this deck is going to have is, along with Grab Your Swords or just steal chip damage cards in general, Mulan is going to be so strong into this. So how do we stop that? Snipe it out their hand. Try and get early Sings of Bare Necessity. Just try and lower their hand as much as you can the first 3 or 4 turns, and then try and get a well-timed You Have Forgotten Me and just snipe it away from them. I think is your best sort of like route to victory if they are playing it. But yeah, Hyper Aggro, as always, on the right day into the right meta, can absolutely win tournaments. Next up, definitely the most boring of all these lists, is Amethyst Steel Beatdown. You could also play a mid-range version of this with like Blue Fairies, Tinkerbells, Jafar Dreadnoughts, all the Yzmas, all that lovely stuff. But yeah, absolutely nothing new here. But I think this is just a really safe, standard deck that can play well into a lot of decks. So if you really just don't know what to expect, maybe you don't even have access to set 4 cards yet, but you have a good like pool of the prior cards, I think this is really safe to go into a tournament and know that you're always going to be able to play the game. Very rarely should you brick. So yeah, nothing more to say, but it's a safe deck to play. Oh, there is one consideration, actually. The new 3-cost LeFou, 2/3 quest for 1, and I learned from the best. During your turn, you may play this character for free if an opposing character was banished in a challenge this turn. So this can open up some really nice early lines where you turn 1 Captain Hook, turn 2 Pinocchio, exert their 1-drop, take them out, and then you put down the LeFou straight away. So then on your turn 3, you can start by just singing Friends on the Other Side with LeFou before you even play anything, which is quite interesting and again helps you build a wider board. But I'm not a complete LeFou believer. I think there's some potential there. So if you want to run this deck and you want to spice it up a little, go with LeFou. Next up, some EA Tempo. Just win the game. Next up, some EA Tempo. Just win the game. Now, I took Artabax's set 4 list as my baseline when I started putting this together. I have made some changes. Artabax was rocking the new Zeus, Mr. Lightning Bolts, who can gain, when he challenges a character, he gets strength equal to the strength of another chosen character. Just again, he's big and bulky with the 5 willpower and quest for 2 and he's cheap. So I do like him. I'm not a huge fan just because he falls to Sisu. All of these cards that don't like characters with 2 strength or less or 3 strength or less, he just immediately falls to. So I'm not a huge fan of Zeus, but it could be something that you consider. There's also the new Megara that I don't think Artabax was playing, but I do like the new Megara, the 3-cost uninkable 3/6 quest for 2. Really nice stat line, and the card that you have to discard to play her is essentially the same as shifting a Robin Hood. There's also Diablo, which again is the card that I'm seeing the most discourse about, whether it's good or whether it's bad, because the fact that it is absolutely factual. If Diablo just sits there unchecked and they don't have the answers, then he's going to generate so much advantage, drawing every time you draw for turn, and anytime you want to draw off of rabbits, Rapunzels, anything, he's drawing all the more. So even makes you think twice about digging for answers. So he can be really, really strong, but I don't think you would ever want to shift him because you -2 yourself to do so. And that's the only way that you can have him be exerted straight away. So then he would immediately replace himself with your opponent. When your opponent draws a card, you draw a card. But if you just play him straight, then you have to wait a full turn, which could happen, but I just think there's so many cards that can take him out. Fire the Cannons, Baboom, Let the Storm Rage On, Strength for a Raging Fire, Teeth and Ambitions, Brawl. I think there's just so many answers to this Diablo. So I don't know where he's going to fall and how good he's going to end up being this meta. We shall see, but for my version of EA Tempo that I'm presenting you now, I'm not playing it. You could also consider things like Lyle Tiberius Rourke if you want a more control variant, or if you want an inkable version of Lyle Tiberius Rourke. You could run Jack, who isn't as good because the good thing about Lyle is that whenever one of your other characters is banished, your opponent loses the lore. Jack doesn't have that, but He's inkable. He's still got that 4 willpower. He also quests for 2, so he's a nice replacement. But other than that, with what we are playing with, we've got the new We Don't Talk About Bruno, which just seems like such a strong card. Being able to return a character to hand and discard a card. We're running the new Cricky, 5-cost inkable, 3/4 quest for 3. And when he's played, your other characters, all of them, get +3 strength. Crab was good. No reason why Cricky shouldn't be good as well. We're running a 2/2 split. We're running the new Pegasus line. Again, a turn 1 evasive Pegasus is really strong. If they're not running answers to it, he can just run away with lore. The shift target is okay. I actually think the baby is better than the shift target. But if you're running the baby, I think it's perfectly reasonable to run the Floodborn. We're running the new Floodborn Ursula in this build. I think it makes a lot of sense because we're running the 4 Ursula 2-drop Deceiver anyway. So I think it makes more sense than any other deck for EA Tempo to run the Sea Witch Queen. Again, she's got some good abilities, really nice stat line, questing for 3. And that's pretty much it. Everything else looking relatively the same. So yeah, EA Tempo, I'm sure is going to have another really good season. Going on to a deck where I think Diablo is absolutely a 100% include is Emerald Steel Bucky Discard. This list, Zephyr did this list, and I looked at it and I was like, I would change nothing. All the lists I'm presenting you today, I've looked at different lists, I've used different templates, but I put my own spins, my own preferences on them. This, I just lifted card for card because I wouldn't change a thing. I think Bucky Discard looks really good this format because we've got 2 3-drop Floodborns. We've got Diablo, which again, we're getting value straight away, putting him down because he's a Floodborn. So if Bucky's down, then they're discarding. And then if he does sit there, then we're going to get even more advantage. There's also the new Floodborn Aladdin. Obviously, we're not planning on shifting him, but we can just play him down flat to make them discard. And the ability is nothing to sniff at. When there's character quest, you can banish a chosen item card. We're running the Pegasus line in this deck as well. Makes all the sense. Gives us a 1-drop into 2-drop Bucky, into 3-drop shift Pegasus. So lots of lines to be able to get Bucky going as quick as possible. And yeah, still the Robin Hood line, which also gives us that turn 1 drop, turn 2 Bucky, turn 3 Floodborn. We are running beasts in this deck. I think this could easily change. You could go up to a 4 count of Prince John. I think that's personally perfectly reasonable. I still like including the Tinkerbells. It's nice to have something in that more mid-range part of the game. And yeah, Ursula, Deceiver of All, hopefully still going to get a lot of advantage off Sudden Chills. Storm Rage on, Strength of Raging Fire. I think this is the best Bucky has looked since Bucky entered the game. So yeah, I think this list is going to be really strong. Next up, Amber, Ruby, Mufasa. Now I actually think that Ruby Amber could go a lot of different ways, and there's even something to be said for building versions without Mufasa and playing more into songs and songs and actions. A few new toys here. I'm running 4 copies of the new Gaston. I just think this is really good. The fact that you've got 4 willpower as well is going to help you survive a little bit more against things like Strength of Raging Fire or Smash, or even survives Rafiki into Pinocchio, which Doc wouldn't. So I really like Gaston, and again, the fact that we're paying 2 less means that on turn 4 we can play a 6-drop of either Perdita, Tremaine, or Medusa, which feels so good. We're running the Mulan package in this as well, which has further synergy because Rapunzel has always been one of the best ways to draw for this particular deck, and Mulan is another target for Rapunzel to draw off on top of Mother Gothel. So that's really good, and again, if we're setting up this Floodborn Mulan, then she can help us board clear. We're running Brawls again to help with the early game. We've got this Queen line here. Queen also really nice synergy with Mulan because it means that we can prop her strength up again, even if it's not the turn that she was shifted, and still max out on that damage. So yeah, so much synergy here. I'm running 4 copies of Lumiere. Keeps Doc and Gaston out of range of Kick Cloud Kicker and Brawl, which I think is really important. It also is going to keep some characters out of Medusa range. Yeah, Mufasa, Gothel, and Lady Tremaine keeps them out of Medusa range. But yeah, I think more importantly for the early game, to ensure that your Docs and Gastons don't get taken out before you can exert them. But yeah, Red Farsa, I think, has a lot of room for interpretation and different builds to do well, and even Red-Yellow in general without Mufasa. Like, I think there's going to be some serious legs in a Red-Yellow just songs build with aerials. So yeah, really excited to try out some more Amber Ruby builds. But for Mufasa, I think this is a really good starting point. And the last list to look at, certainly the most interesting and the most rogue looking, But I think this is going to actually be a really strong deck. We've got some lemon and lime. Now, I think there's absolutely a place for green Mufasa to do well this season, and that I could quite easily have featured that instead. But we looked at Mufasa in the red-yellow deck. So let's go a different way for Amber Emerald songs. So we're playing Ariel, and yeah, a huge package of songs here. We've got Painting the Roses Red, which lowers 2 character strength by 1, and we draw a card. And the fact that we're lowering their strength by 1 means that they could potentially now be taken out by not only the muses that we're running, who when we play a song, we bounce a character with 2 strength or less to their player's hand, but Under the Sea that we're running 2 copies of, put all opposing characters with 2 strength or less on the bottom of their player's deck in any order. So going to help get things into range of that. Also to help get things into range of Under the Sea is our 4/3 Keeda line, the Floodborn. When you play her, all characters get -3 strength. So really playing into that. I'm also running 2 copies of Look at This Family because we're running singers. We've got the Cinderellas, we've got the Ursula Vanessas, we've got Ariels, and finding key pieces sounds really good. We're running We Don't Talk About Bruno as well, which works really well, obviously with the muses, because we can potentially bounce 2 things. Another thing that I really like about the muses is that the turn we put them down, we could immediately sing something with our 1, 2, or 3 drop and immediately start bouncing characters. So I think that's really good. We've got Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo here, which can do a bunch of different things, get us multiple aerial searches, Ursula discards, Cricky strength buffs, Keeda nerfs to strength. So yeah, lots of utility here, and it's just another song. Mother Knows Best for more control. So yeah, I think this looks like a really strong looking deck. Whether or not this is the perfect build of it, probably not, but I think it's a really nice starting point. There's a lot of control here, there's a lot of aggro, and yeah, like, it's very toolbox. It's lots of things it can do, and the fact that it can just wash the field away quite easily, I think is really strong. So yeah, definitely a deck to give a try. And there we have it, 10 safe Day 1 meta decks for set 4. Let me know what you think of the lists. Feel free to give advice, alterations, adaptions in the comments. Maybe someone will watch this video, go to the comments, and they will agree with you. But yeah, this is just meant to be a starting point. I doubt any of these are going to be 100% accurate to what the meta will look like a month from now, 2 months from now. Last season, the meta was ever developing throughout, and I expect that to be the same. But yeah, again, I'm really excited to get into set 4, try out with some new cards, and hopefully these builds will give you a starting point to do your own play testing. But that's it from me for now. One thing, I owe you a story because you hit that 100 likes goal. So I'm going to tell you the story about how I broke both my arms at the same time. The only reason I'm copping out now is because there is a video of it somewhere in existence, and I'm trying to track it down because I feel like it would be better to tell the story with a bit of a video to go with it. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it. If I haven't been able to track it down in the next like 2 or 3 days, then I'll just tell the story without it. But if I can find it, I feel like it would add a lot. But yeah, just an update on that. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you're brand new to the channel, please subscribe for all things Lorcana. Hit that like button to show your support, and we'll see you soon.